Hey, I'm back to do part 3 of this video, which, oh my god, I've been talking so much, and I just realized too that like I'm kind of all over the place and I kind of mixed up days and nights, but that's really how it was in the hospital. Like sometimes you feel like you're in a wormhole and you just lose track of time and you lose track of the days. And anyway, this where I left off last time I was talking about how they, after the first night of phototherapy, which was our third night in the hospital, his levels were actually higher than they were before he did it. So yeah, so the pediatrician obviously was like, well, he's going to need to continue the phototherapy, and it's a good thing we started it when we did, or otherwise it would have went really high and it could have been dangerous. And also I told him about how I gave him a package of that human fortifier stuff, which actually we ended up giving him 2 packages of that because I had gotten a lot more colostrum, and pumping was going really well, and even breastfeeding was going well. Like I was starting to feel really good about everything. And so yeah, when we told the pediatrician that we were able to give him 2 packages of that, he was super impressed and super happy. And he was like, "Oh, you put it in the formula?" And I was like, "No, I pumped like colostrum and I've been pumping milk and stuff and giving him that." And he was like, "Wow, like you're doing great and everything, and it's the best thing you can do for him." And I just felt really good about that because I didn't want to give up and just give him formula. I really wanted to like persevere and give him the colostrum because it's the best thing for him. And I wanted to give him my milk when it came in, which it did come in on that day, which was the 3rd day after he was born. And yeah, so his pumping was going well. I was getting a lot, and he was eating better, and it was great. So yeah, so that last night he was still on the IV, and they would take his blood sugar by poking his little heel every 6 hours, and his blood sugars were staying high. Like they were on the high end of normal, which is kind of what you want when they're on the IV, because the IV is giving them sugar, and also from feeding he should have like a decent amount of sugars in him. So they were up to like 4.7, 4.8 every time they would take it. So that was a really good sign, and it meant that he was getting enough glucose and stuff from eating, and that he wasn't relying on the IV to keep his levels up for him. So then that last night, I was really hoping it was going to be my last night, the 4th night there, and but I wasn't sure because of the fact that he was still in the phototherapy and he was still on the IV, and I was hoping that he would be off the IV, or at least like lowering the dosage of the amount of dextrose that he was being given through the IV, because that's kind of I was under the impression that that's what would happen before he would completely remove it anyway. But anyway, the next morning, they tested his bilirubin again, and when they came back with the results, it was at 131, which is amazing. It dropped almost 100 points overnight for that 2nd night of phototherapy, so I felt so good to hear that, and the nurses were so happy to finally give me some good news, because I felt like everything leading up to this point was all just bad news. Everything was just one thing after the other that my poor son had to go through, and he was only like 4 days old, and it just sucked. And so finally to get some good news, it was just such a relief. And so yeah, so we kept with feeding, and he was eating like for a good 10-15 minutes, like either on one side or on both sides, or going back and forth, and we were kind of keeping track of that, and he was having lots of poos and pees, and that's a good sign that he's eating well. So yeah, so everything was going awesome with that, and I felt so happy about it. And finally he was getting a good latch, to the point where it hurt for the initial latch, which it still kind of does pinch sometimes when he initially latches on, and then but then it's comfortable once he's going at it, and it just feels like a little bit of tugging, and it's just normal. So yeah, so the best feeling ever, I'm telling you. Anyway, so then we were just kind of waiting around to see the pediatrician, but actually he was super busy that night, because apparently like there was a lot of babies in September that were born premature, and that night alone there was one that was born through emergency C-section at I think 34 weeks, another one at 35 weeks. So there was a good like 3 or 4 like preemie babies that needed a lot of attention, and that were even worse off in health-wise than he was. So yeah, I just pray for all those other moms, and I feel their pain having to see their little baby go through all this stuff, and I'm hoping that all those little ones are healthy like my son is now. So yeah, finally when we ended up seeing the pediatrician, it was a bit later in the afternoon, and we were kind of like getting a little frustrated because we just were really hoping to hear good news and that we'd be able to go home, and it almost felt like, you know, the longer we had to wait, the less likely it would be that we would go home. So when we finally saw him, he said for sure that we could stop the phototherapy because his bilirubin had dropped so much, and then he looked at results for his glucose and for the past like 3 tests, which were like the last 18 hours I guess, and they were all high, so he was happy with that. So he said that we could go ahead and take out the IV, and then they would just wait an hour, like they would stop the IV, wait an hour, test his glucose. If it was above 2.7, he could go home. Also, they had weighed him. Okay, so his birth weight was 4 pounds 11 ounces. Day 2 he was 4 pounds 9 ounces. Day 3 he was still 4 pounds 9 ounces, and then day 4, which is when they weighed him again, he had gone up from 4 pounds 9 ounces to almost his birth weight, so he was like just under 4 pounds 11 ounces. So I think it was like 4 pounds 10 something ounces. So that was a good sign, and once he saw that, he had gained weight, his bilirubin was down, and his glucose levels were staying on that high end of normal enough that he wouldn't need the IV. So everything was so good, and he was like, you could definitely go home today as long as, you know, in an hour from now his glucose is at a good level. So, oh my god, best news ever. I was so excited to finally be able to go home. I felt like time was just like standing still in the hospital, being there for 4 nights, and like on day 5 now. It was just craziness. So after they stopped the IV and then they came back an hour later to check his glucose for the last time, I was super nervous because I was like, please don't let it be below 2.7. If it was, I would have like been so devastated. So she does like use a little thing, pricks his little heel, gets a drop of blood, but as she was like trying to use the machine to like grab the blood, he like kicked the machine, which like kind of slowed down the pace of how the blood goes up the thing. So she right away she was like, oh no, he kicked the machine, like it's not going to be accurate, like I'm gonna have to probably redo it. So she's like, don't worry too much about what this says. And it showed up and it was 2.4, and I was like, oh my god, are you sure, like that this is not happening right now, you know? She's like, no, don't worry, I'm gonna do it again. So I was freaking out a little bit, but she tested it again, and sure enough, it was 2.9. So it was above 2.7, and everything was good, and the doctor was like, okay, we could go home, yay, amazing. And yeah, so I was like over the moon, ecstatic. So we packed up all his stuff and put him in his little car seat, and we took our first trip home with him, and oh my god, best feeling in the world. And yeah, so everything has been good so far. We did actually go back to the hospital the next day, the next morning at like 10 a.m. for a revisit, just to again check his glucose, check his bilirubin, weigh him, and make sure that he's still doing well. So we did that, and we went back, and he had gained again another like I think 4 ounces in one day, or since like day 4 to day 5 or 6 he was up to like 4 pounds 15 ounces. So that was amazing. They were all like super impressed with that, and obviously, you know, breastfeeding was going well, and he was eating and gaining, and I felt so good about that. Like nothing makes you more proud as a mom than knowing that, you know, you're feeding your child and that they're growing and getting everything they need from you. And finally, like, I felt accomplished, and that I was like, you know, doing the best I could for him, and it felt great. Yeah, so then they also tested his glucose, and it was 2.9 again, so it was still good and everything. And then they checked his bilirubin, and it had gone up a bit. I think it was like up to 180 or something, but that's normal. And normally after you stop the phototherapy, it rebounds up a bit, but the doctor said like once it goes back up a bit, and then it'll go back down. Like it doesn't continue to rise. It'll like rebound, and then it'll continue to drop after that. So no one was concerned, and everything was good to go. And also we have this like service kind of around here that nurses will call you and come and visit you at your house after you have a new baby, just to answer questions, give you a bunch of information, weigh them, and, you know, check their heart rate, check their breathing, everything like that. So that was really cool, and I love that. So the nurse came over, and she was such a sweetheart, and this was like the next day after. So yeah, which day was this? I don't know. We came home on the 7th. We went back to the hospital on the 8th, so this is the 9th. So September 9th, the nurse came over and weighed him, and he had gained a bunch more weight again, and was now up to 5 pounds, 3.6 ounces. So he was gaining really at a great pace actually, and the nurse was like super impressed and happy, and she asked me how I was doing, and I told her I was doing well, and that I did have like the high blood pressure issue, which actually my blood pressure was still staying high for quite a few days after giving birth even, and I think I just had a lot of stress and anxiety those days in the hospital that kind of didn't help, obviously. And even when I got home, I was still getting anxious feelings in my chest, and that, thank God, that has gone away now, and my blood pressure is like back down normal, and I feel so much better about everything. So she was happy about that, and yeah, so that's pretty much it, I guess. I mean, I know I've kind of talked more about just the birth story, you know, this is not just the labor and delivery, it's kind of everything that my son had to go through afterwards also, but I figured, you know, this is something that I wanted to share with you guys, and so you guys can understand every detail, and like, you know, how I was feeling through everything in case you guys have to go through anything like this, and yeah, so it was really a hard few days, but now everything is perfect, and he's such a healthy boy, and he's like the perfect baby. I couldn't ask for better, I swear. But I am going to do a postpartum update probably when I'm 2 weeks postpartum on Thursday, and I'm going to do like an introduction video and show you guys some clips of baby Nate. And yeah, I don't want to add that to this video because this video is just way too long as it is, and if you guys are still watching, like, thank you. I can't believe you're still watching because I've been talking for way too long. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed listening to this super long story, and yeah, so I will talk to you at for my 2 week postpartum / little introduction to baby Nate video. So I'll see you guys soon. Bye.